Now let's pivot to a conversation about how the diaspora can accelerate their philanthropic journeys. This session will give us practical insights on how each of us can unlock our full giving potential. So please welcome Prachi Pal, who is going to be moderating this conversation. She's one of our own from Dasra, and along with her, we have our lovely panelists, Sonam Bhattacharya, Ina Jamuna Brower, Ranu Bopana, and Vivek Sharma. Welcoming all of you on stage, please.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. A really great group of discussions since morning and lovely insights. And we've been having a chat around how diaspora can actually contribute so much, given the fact that there is so much potential, not just in terms of financial capital, but also intellect, network, tools, and whatnot that we can unlock really together. And this room is a powerful room in that sense. And as someone whose literally day job is researching and writing about philanthropy day in, day out, let me start with what I know best, which is some data pointers in terms of how do we define the philanthropic potential within this room of diaspora givers. So philanthropic contributions from the Indian diaspora in the US alone are projected to grow from $0.2 billion in 2023 to $2.5 billion by 2030, right? So that's the potential. And this growth actually aligns with the ultra-high net worth projections of Indian origin in the US, which is expected to reach 1.03 trillion by 2030. Just putting some numbers to the entire potential that we've been discussing since morning. Yeah, but here's the opportunity gap as well, which is that even though Indian Americans have nearly doubled the median income, their donation rates are actually half of the US national average. So they contribute about 1.5% of their income to charity, while the average American donates closer to 4% in terms of what we're discussing. And this gap actually widens as incomes increase, right? Pointing to underutilization of the philanthropic potential that diaspora givers actually have. And we've got an incredible panel today who we're very excited to hear from, and we'll discuss both aspects in terms of how does one accelerate the giving journeys of Indian diaspora, both in terms of the local context, but also in terms of the global context. And so far, we've discussed a bunch about India, but this panel will also talk about giving to local communities in the States as well. And Ina, I'd love to start with you in terms of the work that you do with NEID Global. And we've been sharing about this untapped or unlocking philanthropic potential. But what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that diaspora face in terms of being able to give, right, outside of their country? So yes, would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Thank you so much. So yeah, I run a donor network called Need Global, or Network of Engaged International Donors, here out of Boston, but we have membership across the country. And our mission is really to increase the amount of money that goes from the United States to global causes. And we have 200 members across the country that are very diverse in terms of their interests, their geographic focus, their thematic focus, or even their capacity. And we run about 60 programs a year, and the whole purpose of what we're doing with these programs is to build community among our members. And our whole theory of change is that by having people be in friendship with each other, they will inspire each other to give more. So, to your question, diaspora funders are not unlike other private philanthropists, family foundations, individuals, or families that are giving globally. What they're really looking for, and their main challenge, is where to begin. You know, how to find the nonprofits, even though there's probably a lot of fundraisers in this room going, me. But it's actually hard to find the right ones from the other side, and to find partners to invest with. And so that's what a lot of what we do, is to sort of highlight organizations and opportunities and help people learn from each other.
Thanks, Ina. And on that note, I love to bring you in, Vivek, for the conversation, someone who's been able to really exemplify philanthropic efforts in both the US but also India, and giving across different sectors, right from education to sustainability, and would love to understand what has really motivated that giving journey, and how has involving your family, in particular your wife and your daughter, really enhanced that giving journey for you, and what have been some of the learnings that you can share with the room?
Better now? Okay, good afternoon again. So first of all, listen, if philanthropy was a startup, right, somebody said, the numbers that you just shared, it would be a very good investment. Okay, but I can tell you that even if it's not a startup, the return on the growth that you can get with this, I think, is going to be phenomenal. So for us, listen, it all started small. We were passionate about giving, but resources is always a challenge, right? So once we started having resources, we always wanted to share. Because in some ways I felt like our means were limited, and I think our resources were disproportionately higher than what we needed for ourselves. So it started small. As we started small, we realized that the potential to create impact with the resources is much bigger if we get deeper with those projects that we work with. And the way to get deeper is to get family involved. So some of these initiatives started because my daughter wanted something, she was passionate about something, or my wife was passionate about something because she has seen challenges in some of this. And for me, it was very easy to craft project or to work with organizations which really cater to those needs. So in some way, we were fulfilling our own needs actually through the philanthropic organization, through the philanthropic work. But for us, I think it was important that whatever we do, it should have a long-lasting impact. So we looked at initiatives that we could commit for long-term. I use the word generational impact. So for me, it is important that whatever I'm doing now, I want to see the benefit of it with the next generation. Otherwise, just doing short-term was not helpful for us. So we were able to work with these organizations on creating projects that were transformational in nature, that was measurable impact, and potentially, will impact the next generation. And as I said, my daughter was very fascinated about young girls in India. So we started a project with a lot of young girls into one state that can potentially transform the next generation in the state. My wife was very focused on environment. She was worried about the water levels in India. So we started something big on tree plantation. And we have done a very large number of tree plantation. Now the question is not just tree plantation, how can you plant trees that have a bigger purpose? So right, you do medicinal trees rather than just a general tree. And where to plant, and how can the tree become a source of economy for the local villagers? So a lot of thought has gone in designing these programs, but basically it all revolved around where can I get family involved. And I think it's a very good thing because there is something more common to talk amongst us about philanthropy, about the projects that we work on.
I think that sounds fantastic, Vivek. Thank you. Definitely, family as a unit giving together definitely deepens the journey, as we understand from Vivek. I think just including next generation has been a common question across many minds who'd like to involve their families, right? For second generation or third generation who may not be born in India or who may not have that kind of a stronger connect to India. How do we engage with them? So Nandan, I'm going to come to you for this question. You've worked with young people as you teach in the Boston College. From your experience, what can be those motivating factors to really bring in the next generation into engaging with philanthropy, but also providing the platform to really be able to seed some of those ideas and try and give them some shape?
Thank you, Prachi. So first of all, thanks to Nirmal and Sia Lakshmi in terms of bringing the fresh perspective of the younger generation. Yes, I get to interact with people from Generation Z and looking at the outlooks of Generation Alpha that's coming up post-COVID. And I, of course, don't represent any of those things from my point of view. I'm much older. And the way I was raised, philanthropy was kind of the domain of the privileged. Philanthropy was something that somebody else who earns more can do it. I'm just, an average middle-class person. And in fact, I've had conversations with relatives and friends in India. Well, I need to look after myself. That was kind of the phrase that came up to me several times. So demystifying the meaning of philanthropy for Generation Z and Alpha, that's one piece. The good thing that is there are people like Nirmal and Sia who are there, who already are motivated. And they will go ahead and make changes and suggest changes whether we like it or not. So how can we get these young people a person who's just getting into the working world, and change that percentage from 1.5 to 4 or above is the piece. And that kind of gets into demystifying the meaning, number one. Number two, from my perspective, if that generation is rolling up its sleeves and working with us, meaning philanthropy with rather than for. So there are many ways of doing it, and it's all of the above, that's true. But in this case, if they're aware of what's happening to the resources, even if it's $1, and how that is going in and making a difference. And then the third thing is, coming in from perhaps an Indian background, there are certain things that have been built in traditionally also about giving, about daan and other things. And second and third generation, my kids, our kids, they are all kind of tuned to wanting to make a difference. So I think it's now the how, working on the how, and the who. So understanding the who, how their minds work in terms of making a difference, philanthropy, and then the how, in terms of understanding those minds in terms of what are they looking for. And I think you mentioned that, Ina, that what is a good platform to donate or participate in? Because there's so much out there. There's also fake news and all the things and fake platforms that are out there in today's world. So finding the right place and having a skin in the game and to be able to kind of demystify things is one of the things I would suggest.
Right, thanks, Anand. That sounds fantastic. Ranu, your journey has been very unique in terms of contributing your time and effort, whether it's contributing in terms of being a physician for a profession, or whether it's preserving history with the way that you worked with the MIT project. Could you share your own experience in terms of philanthropy going beyond financial contribution and contributing in terms of time and effort, and how has that shaped your own understanding and approach to philanthropy?
Sure, and thank you for inviting me. This has been a wonderful day. I'm a retired physician. I worked in immigrant health in New York. I've been part of many organizations that have worked on health and mental health, and so it's been wonderful to hear all of this. But my most recent passion project actually is about the history of South Asians at MIT. I'm an MIT alum. I got involved with the Alumni Association. And while I was president of the South Asian Alumni Association, I started to just think about when did the first Desi come to MIT. And when I found out that it was in 1880, which was only 20 years after MIT's founding and 100 years before I was on campus, I was just stunned. And then when I learned there was a historian who had done some work, very little known work, who discovered that many of the freedom fighters under the British India, many close associates of Gandhi actually were among the first students at MIT. They really saw MIT as a model institute of technology that would enable them to learn the skills that they needed to become economically free and independent. And later there was a very close association with Nehru, and he recruited the engineers that were trained at MIT, who later became the nation builders. And even the State Department, during the Cold War, used MIT in what they called engineering diplomacy to help set up some of the IITs in India. And as I learned of some of this incredible history, I said, people need to know about this. And we were able to raise some seed funds, and I was able to connect with a historian here at MIT, Professor Sana Iyer, who, very fortunately for me, took on this project. And we used that seed money to fund students to do more research. And the students were just incredibly excited about this because this is their own history. Especially for Asian immigrants, sometimes we're seen as these perpetual foreigners, and we don't realize all these deep roots that we have in this country and these institutions. And we did, 2-3 years worth of research, looking in the archives and discovering all these amazing connections of South Asia at MIT and MIT in South Asia. And really the two shaping both in these incredible ways. As we were able to uncover some of this, we actually were able to get MIT to fund, to continue to fund our project. We had an exhibit at MIT for over a year at the Malhagen Gallery. We then worked with the MIT libraries to have a digital exhibition, which you can find online if you search South Asia and MIT. We also created 3 short films, which are on YouTube. So it's been a lot of fun, and we're now going to take this exhibit to India. And I think that it's really important because it, first of all, honors the incredible grit and determination of these early pioneers who had, just incredible circumstances that they were working in to really pave the way for those of us who've come after. But also, it's meant a lot for students who have really seen this as their genealogy. And finally, I'd like to say that it's not just about MIT. As far as I know, this is the first such project that's done this kind of historical research at a university archive. And it's really the history of Indian Americans. And it's in these university archives. We've learned so much about these incredible individuals, and we would not know it if we did not look. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Thanks, Ranu. And on that note, in terms of strengthening the role of diaspora, and I'm going to come back to you, in terms of what does the ecosystem need to be able to support diaspora, to be able to give more in terms of the potential that we're talking about? What are certain practical strategies or networks or tools? We've discussed a lot about peer learning platforms, collaboration, partnership, and this forum being one of them, right? What more does the ecosystem really need to support diaspora who think about, yes, I want to give, but then what do I do and where do I go?
Well, I don't know, is this on? Yeah. There's a lot changing in the ecosystem since COVID. I think there's a huge awareness both in India and here in the United States about the interconnectedness of everything in the whole world, really. But in particular, I think the moment of where COVID was so drastic in India really woke a lot of people up on both continents. And so there's, a lot of organizations like mine or like Dasra and Indiaspora are really looking at the numbers that you mentioned at the beginning and saying, wow, how can we really unleash that potential? And so, I would say there's a proliferation of opportunities for people to get involved. There's collaboratives such as, actually the Build India Fund is one, where you can get involved, and there's a lot of support in terms of sort of taking you through a philanthropic journey. There's something like the Circle of Hope that some people in the audience created here that's a small giving circle that really provides very personal learning around specific organizations. There's organizations like my own, which really are targeting philanthropists who want to personally be involved in their sort of adventure or philanthropic journey. And then there's online options, as you mentioned. I mean, there's really, it's pick your journey to create the India of your dreams in some ways. So there's a lot of opportunities out there, I'd say, at this time for people to invest more.
Absolutely. It's quite an opportune time, and we're not very far away from the 2047 mark. Looks far away, but it really will come in the blink of an eye, come to think of it like that. Vivek, I want to understand from you in terms of when we say philanthropic potential of diaspora, we're not just talking about funds, right? We've been discussing since morning about what more in terms of intellect, networks, etc., that diaspora can also bring to the table. And given that you've built such successful businesses, how do you borrow your learnings from both worlds and kind of bring them on the same table in terms of applying some of the learnings from business to philanthropy, and what are opportunities that you currently see in India where a mix of this can be applied?
So I think few things. Listen, I mean, for profit, a lot of us are here from the business community or education or, startups and all other different fields. Everything we try to do in business is to create value, right? Create an impact. And there's a measurable number that we want to maximize the impact with the limited resources we have in the limited time. And I think that applies very much to the philanthropy as well. It doesn't matter how much you collect, you're always looking for the next dollar, you're always doing fundraising. So how can you maximize the value of that dollar from that impact? So I think first thing is look for the value maximization from the dollar money that you have. And you talked a lot about collaboration today. I was actually very encouraged. I believe that there is collaboration, but I still believe there's a lot of need for more collaboration. It sounded very good, but I tell you, I work on the ground. I have multiple projects running, and I wish there was more collaboration on the ground. I genuinely believe, because while we may not be competing with each other, but we don't talk to each other enough. We have our own agenda that we want to really prove to our donors that we do this in this state, and we are better than the other one. I'm telling you, there is no better. We all have a same common goal, same vision, and this is how we will measure success. So why are we fighting, or why are we competing, and what are we trying to prove? The proof comes in the impact that we will make. So, from a business perspective, right, you run a business, you look at a measurable impact. If your stock price has gone up, your value has gone up, or if your customer is satisfied and you're growing the business, same thing. In how are you really generating more value from the limited resources? And I always say limited resources, it doesn't matter how much money you raise. As a non-profit, some of the organizations have raised a lot of money and they take pride, oh my God, I'm raising so much money, which is great, but the need is a lot more, right? You all know that it doesn't matter how much you raise, you will be on the raise table again. So maximize the value from the dollar. Leverage resources from an intellect perspective. My belief is the projects I get involved with, I spend my time in that. There's a lot of knowledge, know-how in the people that are successful in commercial, in education, in science, in other fields. They want to contribute, they want to get involved. So figure out a way to leverage their knowledge and get them involved. I can also tell you, if you get people involved from their time perspective, they're more likely to give more money, okay? So get them involved, and the sooner you get involved, the more value you get. I think third is have a longer term view. I think a lot of time people have a short term view that I'm just doing this for 3 years and then I'll serve. I think if you have a longer term view, keep in mind that people's ability to give is long term. They may start small, but hopefully they keep growing. So if you have a longer term view and a longer term initiative, you'll be able to engage the donor for a long term, and then demonstrate a measurable impact, which is very, very important. Same thing in business, that you want to see a measurable impact. Same thing in non-profit, you want to see a measurable impact that you can, really achieve. So these are 3 or 4 things that I say that, similar to business, you can really work in non-profit and then try to figure out how you can maximize the value of the impact that we create.
Right. Thanks, Vivek. That definitely deserves an applause. I'm going to come to you, Sanand, on that note. We've discussed a lot of interesting, cutting-edge things today, right from AI to data, and design thinking is also something that's really been the talk of the town, right? But a lot of us many of us may not understand how does one actually leverage that and apply those principles to philanthropy, and particularly to engaging the next generation in philanthropy. So if you could help demystify and decode some of that and talk about certain practical steps as to how does one apply that approach to engaging young people in philanthropy.
Sure. So you made a point, philanthropy is not just about money.
Yes.
And philanthropy is about a purpose, about a goal, working towards the common good. So as we look at that, the common good, let's take, for instance, somebody who's 25 years old in their first job. The tension on one side is to be productive, economic growth, whatever company you're for. On the other side, you have impact that we are wanting people to get involved in. The gap is quite a bit. So, but if purpose, that is impact-driven is well-defined, and they understand that. And let's park the term philanthropy for a bit, but get into how can I make a difference. Look at a day in the life of a young 20, 30-year-old person who's married, who has one kid, has a lot of other things to do, but they have a heart here. And they are trying to make a difference. Let's open those opportunities from the viewpoint of purpose, so that it's not about money, but I can lend my time, I can lend my intellect, I can lend my technology, creativity, whatever it is. So I think if we make that a little bit more intentional and not leave that just to chance, because right now, many of our things are left to chance. It's catch it as you can. But I think there's an opportunity to have purpose, well-defined purpose, to get involvement going. And they're happening in many sectors, but I think there's room for improvement on that.
Right, and as we talk about the role of diaspora as well in terms of taking responsibility for their own giving journeys, right? Both in terms of India as well as globally. Rana, I'm going to come to you for this one. In terms of, let's talk about local communities. We've had an entire day of conversation around India, right? So for this particular segment, for Ranu's question, I want to understand from you in terms of what do you think is the responsibility for diaspora community, for diaspora in the States? And what can one do in their local communities to expand or accelerate their giving journeys, really? And if you can share some examples of what you've been doing thus far as well.
That's a good question. Definitely, I think the diaspora has a unique perspective. And, they see things as a second generation, individual myself. I see things differently than my parents, but I also see things differently from someone who, is not from South Asia. And, certainly in my journey, working in immigrant health, it was really important for us to create those social service organizations that specifically worked with those communities in their languages of origin in Queens, New York. And for example, when COVID hit, that community was disproportionately impacted. And without those organizations there, the government agencies would not have been able to reach those individuals. So I think that there is that important responsibility for the diaspora to really create those institutions, that they can see that don't exist. And the same with, my current project with MIT. MIT was not aware of this history. And we have to bring this up, and we have to say, look, this is important, let's look at it. And look at how incredible this is.
Right, and I initially thought of my last question to really be a rapid fire, but maybe I've drilled down the fact that everybody had like 3 to 4 minutes to speak so much that everybody actually kept to time. So we are winding up in time actually. So I'm going to make this not a rapid fire question, but like a general question in terms of what's that one mindset shift. And the common question to all of you, and feel free to go in whichever order you would prefer, what's that one mindset shift that you feel diaspora funders need to make to unlock their own potential, right? And we've talked about a lot of new thinking, talked about a lot of ambitious, bold ideas. What is the one thing that they can change about themselves in their own minds? Would love to hear that from the panel.
So I guess I go first. So I would say actually several things. Number one, I think that diaspora funders tend to focus on their own country, but there is probably a lot they could learn from other countries. So, sort of apply a wider lens as you go on your journey learning, where you want to and how you want to give. Secondly, I would also say be very curious. I think a lot of diaspora funders probably go into it thinking, I know what's happening in my village or where I come from and so on, but things have changed. And so be very open and be very curious as you begin your journey, but also as you continue your journey in investing and in philanthropy, because you have to listen to what's happening on the ground and listen to the people who you're helping.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll go. For me, I think it's very simple. I think big and get involved. And involved doesn't mean money. Involvement could be multiple ways, right? Money always counts, but I think get involved. The more people get involved, they will make a big impact.
I think to echo Ina's point about the wider lens, and Sejal Desai also said that it's not about just what I am doing, it's about our purpose. The good thing is, the positive thing is, the opportunities are immense. There's medicine, there's diabetes, there's education, there is nutrition. We've heard since morning many different areas. How can we blur the boundaries so that we can still participate as a young person in making a difference and work in a more together way to solve that problem? I think the next generation is primed to bring about change a lot more than us, who are very siloed in our own approach in our lives. So let's capitalize on that.
That's great. And I would say that there's also a lot of incredible growth that happens personally when you are involved in a giving journey. I know that for myself, I have been involved in philanthropic causes and volunteer from when I was a student, and at every point in my career. I've met the best people through those endeavors, and I've learned so many other skills because of that. What I learned in medical school is very narrow, but what I learned in, creating these organizations and volunteering has led to a much broader education.
Fantastic. I think some really great actionable insights, really, and ending on a very hopeful note. And thank you so much to the panel for sharing all the great work and knowledge. I'll hand that back to the MCs. That's the end of the session. Thank you.